The 1980s lived under the shadow of the mushroom cloud, a decade where neon lights sparkled above, but dread simmered below. Cinema became prophecy, turning fear into vision. Some films comforted, others scarred, and a few still echo today, reminders of how close we once came. These are 12 nuclear apocalypse films that still shock audiences, even now. 1. The Day After, 1983. A quiet Kansas town. Children at football practice. Families gathered at dinner tables. Then, in one terrible instant, the sky tears open with fire. The day after begins with ordinary life, only to rip it away in a vision so raw it paralyzed America. At its core are families like the Dahlbergs, clinging to routine against a backdrop of impending doom. Fathers try to hold steady, mothers comfort children who do not understand. The characters are stand-ins for all of us, lives that felt secure until reality erupted. Released in 1983, this television movie was more than entertainment. It was an event. Over 100 million Americans tuned in, schools debated it, churches held discussions. Even the president himself confessed its imagery haunted him, altering his perception of nuclear policy. Critics were divided, some calling it exploitative, others calling it essential. Yet audiences agreed on one thing: they had never seen such stark devastation presented so plainly. The film offered no heroes, no victories, just survival, fragile, desperate, and fleeting. Decades later, its grainy realism feels eerily timeless. The streets of Lawrence, Kansas are still burned into collective memory, a reminder that ordinary lives can vanish in a single flash. The Day After doesn't just shock, it warns, and it still whispers its warning now. 2. Threads, 1984. A bustling city. Children race bicycles through Sheffield, shoppers haggle in markets, and then the unimaginable. Threads takes the everyday rhythms of British life and shatters them in one of cinema's most relentless depictions of nuclear war. We meet Ruth, a young woman planning a future with her partner, her world defined by small hopes and human joys. But soon her life, like the city itself, becomes unrecognizable. Characters transform from neighbors and parents into scavengers and survivors, marked by silence, hunger, and despair. Broadcast in 1984 by the BBC, Threads was not simply a film, it was an endurance test. Critics hailed it as the most terrifying film ever made. Schools showed it in classrooms, while adults reportedly wept in living rooms. Few who saw it emerged unchanged. What made Threads so piercing was not spectacle, but realism. Its clinical tone, documentary narration, and unflinching detail left no room for comfort. No musical swells, no catharsis, only the brutal unraveling of a society once held together by fragile threads. Even today its images linger: ashen children, empty cities, language itself breaking down into silence. Threads shocks not with fantasy, but with probability. It remains one of cinema's boldest warnings, reminding us that the end, if it comes, will be slow, merciless, and shared. Third Testament, 1983. A small California town. A family gathered at the dinner table, the radio murmuring news in the background. Then the signal cuts, a distant flash, and silence. Testament begins not with chaos, but with stillness, the slow erasure of life after nuclear fallout. The film follows Carol, a mother clinging to normalcy as her children's world slips away. There are no mushroom clouds shown on screen, no armies marching across borders. Instead, we see the collapse of routine, school plays canceled, neighbors vanishing, the warmth of community fading into absence. Released in 1983, Testament was the opposite of spectacle. Produced on a small budget, it earned critical acclaim for its restraint. Jane Alexander's haunting performance as Carol earned her an Academy Award nomination, praised for its quiet dignity amidst despair. What makes Testament unforgettable is its focus on humanity, not destruction. It asks, what do we hold on to when everything else is gone? Its intimate scale makes the apocalypse feel all the more real. We watch not cities burn, but families fracture, not nations fall, but innocents fade. Unlike its louder counterparts, Testament lingers through whispers and empty chairs. Its heartbreak is not in what it shows, but in what it withholds. That silence is deafening. And decades later, it still echoes. Fourth War Games, 1983. A teenager's bedroom, cluttered with wires, glowing screens, and curiosity. David Lightman, a high school hacker, believes he's stumbled into a harmless game. But in a world balanced on nuclear triggers, a game is never harmless. War Games isn't about bombs falling. It's about how close we come to letting them. Matthew Broderick's David is charmingly naive, more interested in impressing a girl than reshaping geopolitics. Yet his keystrokes awaken the unthinkable, computers mistaking play for reality, simulations for war. The relationship between David and Jennifer, played by Ali Sheedy, grounds the story, making global annihilation hinge on teenage recklessness and first love. Released in 1983, the film was a box office success, tapping into fears of technology outrunning human control. Critics praised its cleverness, its blending of youthful adventure with adult terror. Governments noticed too. Debates over cybersecurity and nuclear safeguards intensified in its wake. What endures is the film's chilling plausibility. Unlike grand battlefields or ruined cities, War Games places apocalypse in the most mundane setting, a teenager's desk. It's the quiet click of a keyboard that nearly ends the world. Its legacy lies in that uneasy laughter, entertained yet unsettled. Decades later, War Games still feels urgent, reminding us that humanity's fate can hinge not on generals or presidents, but on a single mistake, a single key. Fifth Miracle Mile, 1988. It begins with a payphone ringing in the Los Angeles night. A man answers. On the other end, a trembling voice reveals the unthinkable. Nuclear war is imminent, and missiles are already on their way. From that single call, Miracle Mile unfolds in real time, capturing the frantic unraveling of a city on the brink. At its heart is Harry, played by Anthony Edwards, who has just fallen in love with Julie, a woman he's convinced is his soulmate. Their story should be one of romance, of chance encounters blossoming into destiny. But instead, love collides with apocalypse. As Harry scrambles to reach Julie, the city spirals into panic, sirens wailing, streets crumbling into chaos. Their connection becomes the only anchor in a world disintegrating by the minute. Released in 1988, the film arrived at the tail end of the Cold War, when tensions were easing, but paranoia still lingered. Though not a box office smash, it quickly became a cult favorite, celebrated for its intensity and devastating honesty. Critics admired its willingness to forego spectacle in favor of dread, building tension with a ticking clock rather than explosions. What lingers decades later is the film's suffocating urgency. Unlike other apocalypse stories, Miracle Mile doesn't look away. It offers no time jumps, no reprieves, just a slow, relentless countdown to the end, as ordinary people reveal both kindness and cruelty in their final hours. The film asks a simple question. If you had 1 hour left before the end of the world, what would you do? And as Harry and Julie cling to each other against the darkening sky, the answer feels tragically, beautifully human. 6. When the Wind Blows, 1986. Two elderly figures sit in their countryside cottage. Jim and Hilda Bloggs, voices warm and gentle, follow government pamphlets on what to do if nuclear war should strike. They gather supplies, tape windows, and cling to optimism, certain that the authorities know best. When the Wind Blows begins in innocence, only to slide into heartbreak. Based on Raymond Briggs' illustrated novel, this 1986 animated film combines childlike imagery with devastating realism. Jim and Hilda are not warriors or rebels. They are an ordinary married couple, embodying a generation that survived one war and believed it could survive another. Their conversations, laced with humor and hope, make their gradual decline all the more crushing. Upon release, the film received critical acclaim for its bravery. Some audiences were unsettled, unable to reconcile its cartoon visuals with its haunting subject matter. Yet that juxtaposition was precisely its power. By using animation, the film stripped away spectacle and reduced nuclear catastrophe to its human essence. Frail bodies, fading spirits, love enduring in the face of annihilation. Its soundtrack, featuring David Bowie's haunting title song, adds another layer of sorrow. Music floats over the quiet decay, reminding us of dreams that cannot outlast fallout. When the Wind Blows remains one of the most quietly devastating depictions of nuclear war. There are no mushroom clouds here, no grand battles, just two people, in love, doing their best to follow instructions, believing they will be okay. And that belief, that tender, misplaced faith, is what makes it unforgettable. Seventh Battle Truck, 1982. Dust swirls across a barren wasteland. From the horizon emerges a hulking armored vehicle, more fortress than truck, bristling with weapons and menace. In Battle Truck, civilization has crumbled after nuclear conflict, and what remains is ruled by warlords and machines. The film follows Straker, a ruthless commander who terrorizes survivors with his indestructible vehicle, and Hunter, a wandering loner who becomes the reluctant defender of a small community. Their conflict is primal, control versus freedom, domination versus hope. But it is also mechanical, fought not with ideology, but with roaring engines and brutal steel. Released in 1982, this New Zealand production drew comparisons to Mad Max, yet carved its own niche. Its low budget demanded creativity, turning landscapes into characters and machinery into monsters. Critics at the time dismissed it as exploitation, but audiences drawn to its raw energy saw something else. A vision of humanity stripped down to survival, technology turned predator. What makes Battle Truck endure is its imagery, the looming truck, an unstoppable force rolling across a fragile world. Unlike the invisible dread of fallout, this apocalypse is physical, embodied in diesel and iron. It speaks to fears not only of nuclear fire, but of how quickly humanity might surrender freedom to power once order collapses. Today, Battle Truck feels like a forgotten relic, yet one worth revisiting. Its roar across the desert is more than spectacle. It is prophecy, a reminder that when society breaks, it is often not the bombs themselves, but the people who seize control afterward, who haunt the survivors. 8. Escape from New York, 1981. The skyline of Manhattan, encircled by walls, patrolled by helicopters. Once the shining jewel of America, now a maximum security prison. In Escape from New York, director John Carpenter envisioned a near future shaped by collapse, paranoia, and the aftermath of global conflicts, including nuclear tension simmering just beyond its walls. At the center stands Snake Plissken, an anti-hero played with cold charisma by Kurt Russell. A war veteran turned criminal, Snake is sent into the prison city to rescue the president after Air Force One crashes within. His relationships are fleeting, alliances born of necessity in a world where trust is a rare commodity. The film doesn't dwell on intimacy, but thrives on survival instinct, where loyalty and betrayal can turn in a heartbeat. Released in 1981, its timing was uncanny. With Cold War anxieties high, audiences found resonance in Carpenter's dystopia, even if the film wrapped its darkness in pulp stylings. While not directly about nuclear war, its backdrop of global decay and militarized America reflected the same fears fueling apocalyptic cinema of the decade. Critics initially received it with mixed reviews, but its cult status grew, turning Snake into an icon of anti-establishment grit. The film's bleak humor, neon shadows, and relentless atmosphere cemented it as more than escapism. It was allegory, reflecting a world cracking under pressure. What keeps Escape from New York shocking today is its plausibility. The walls, the abandonment of justice, the casual acceptance of despair, it all feels closer than fiction should. In Carpenter's vision, apocalypse isn't sudden, it's gradual, and when it comes, it wears the face of indifference. 9. Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior, 1981. A sun-scorched wasteland, the roar of engines. A lone figure in black leather stands beside his V8 Interceptor, eyes haunted, heart closed to the world. This is Max Rockatansky, the drifter, the avenger, the reluctant savior. In Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior, nuclear apocalypse is not spectacle. It is aftermath, raw and unforgiving. Here, civilization has collapsed into scattered tribes, scavenging fuel and food. Violence is currency. Communities barricade themselves against marauders in a struggle that feels both primal and inevitable. Max, once a family man, is now a shell, his only companions a loyal dog and his car. Yet even in his detachment, humanity claws at him, forcing him to choose between isolation and reluctant sacrifice. Released in 1981, the film became a landmark of apocalyptic cinema. George Miller stripped away excess, crafting a lean, brutal vision of survival. Critics hailed it as groundbreaking, and audiences worldwide were transfixed by its ballet of violence. Armored convoys crashing through desert, engines howling like beasts. What endures is its paradox. The road warrior is ferocious, yet poetic. Its violence is horrifying, yet choreographed with artistry. And at its core lies a question. What does it mean to survive without connection? Max's journey suggests that even in ruin, humanity's greatest weapon is solidarity. Decades later, its imagery, the desolate highways, the marauders in leather and spikes, the final chase across the sands, remains iconic. Mad Max 2 is more than a sequel. It is a blueprint, a vision of how fragile our civilization is once the fuel runs dry, and how the fight for survival can strip us to bone. 10th Malevel, 1981. Stone walls. A medieval castle overlooking the French countryside. Inside, friends gather for wine and conversation, unaware their lives will soon fracture forever. When nuclear fire devastates the world beyond, the castle becomes a refuge and a prison. Malevel, based on Robert Merle's novel, transforms apocalypse into parable, where survival is as much moral as physical. The film follows Emmanuel, a former teacher, and his companions as they attempt to rebuild society within the safety of the castle. They are bound by friendship, yet strained by fear, scarcity, and the creeping return of violence. Power struggles emerge, alliances crack, and in their fortress, once a symbol of history, they learn how fragile the bonds of community can be under pressure. Released in 1981, Malevel took a quieter, more philosophical path than its Hollywood counterparts. Rather than spectacle, it leaned on atmosphere and character, exploring the psychology of survivors. French critics appreciated its somber tone, while international audiences found it too subdued, overshadowed by louder apocalyptic films of the decade. But what makes Malevel endure is precisely its stillness. The ruined villages, the muted countryside, the silence of ash drifting across once lively landscapes, it evokes apocalypse not through explosions, but through absence. In its quiet, the film confronts a timeless truth. Survival is not only about food and shelter, but about preserving decency when the world tempts cruelty. Today, Malevel lingers as a forgotten gem, haunting not because of what it shows, but because of what it suggests. That after the fire, humanity must decide not only how to live, but how to remain human. 11th Virus, 1980. Snow sweeps across Antarctica. Scientists huddle against the cold, unaware that beyond their frozen outpost, civilization is unraveling. In Virus, a sweeping Japanese production also known as Fukatsu no Hai, the apocalypse comes not from bombs, but from a man-made plague unleashed amid nuclear tension. And what follows is no less devastating. The film interweaves global storylines, tracing political leaders, scientists, and soldiers as they grapple with catastrophe. Yet, at its core, lies the survival of a few dozen men stranded in Antarctica, spared only by isolation. Their relationships fracture under despair, love letters that will never be answered, loyalties tested by distance and grief. Released in 1980, Virus was among the most expensive Japanese films ever made, with an international cast including George Kennedy and Glenn Ford. Though criticized for its sprawling ambition and uneven storytelling, its scale was undeniable. It blended pandemic panic with Cold War dread, suggesting that human folly, biological or nuclear, would be our undoing. What makes Virus memorable is its unrelenting bleakness. There is no easy salvation, no grand victory. Instead, humanity becomes the architect of its own demise, undone by arrogance and mistrust. Today, viewed through the lens of global crises, Virus feels prophetic. Its chilling landscapes of emptiness remind us that survival is fragile and that often the greatest threat to humanity is humanity itself. 12. Phoenix 277 1980. A glowing futuristic city. Towering spires, mechanized skies, humanity racing toward technological glory. Yet beneath the neon brilliance lies exhaustion, Earth itself dying after nuclear and ecological ruin. In Phoenix 2772, an animated epic from Japan, the apocalypse is both mythic and futuristic, blending science fiction with cosmic parable. The story follows Godo, a boy raised for a singular purpose, to serve a dying society controlled by machines. Yet his journey becomes one of rebellion, of discovering love and sacrifice in a world where human connection has been stripped away. Characters are drawn not only as individuals, but as symbols of humanity's spirit, fragile yet unyielding. Released in 1980, the film was adapted from Osamu Tezuka's legendary manga. Though it struggled to find mainstream international audiences, it became a cult treasure, admired for its ambition and artistry. Critics praised its lush animation and sweeping vision, noting how it dared to mix nuclear dread with spiritual allegory. What makes Phoenix 2772 endure is its tone, tragic yet transcendent. It does not merely show collapse. It frames humanity's fall as part of a larger cosmic cycle. Nuclear destruction becomes not only an end, but a beginning, a chance to reflect on what must be reborn. Decades later, the film's imagery, glowing cities crumbling into dust, a lone hero rising against fate, still resonates. It is apocalypse told not with despair alone, but with poetry, a reminder that even in endings, there can be meaning. The 1980s gave us visions that still burn decades later. These films warned, mourned, and imagined. They shocked us then, and they still do now, reminders of fragility, resilience, and the shadows of the mushroom cloud. Subscribe, like, and join us as we rediscover more forgotten cinematic echoes.